yela, yela, umba. Now that this our Dimash Bra is going live the world over, I'm using this opportunity to erase some false images of me. So all you people listening out there in London, France, Boston, Canada, there are many misconceptions about here. All you just hear, it's a fear. We are not Trinidad and Tobago, brother. We are not a part of Jamaica. Though we sing reggae, that's not our culture. It's mankind, so here. You hear? So when you hear Belafonte and Mr. Poindexter, that is not Kaiso, that is brandy mixed with water. And you don't think that mighty Sparrow is the only king of Kaiso. There's also Kitchener, the Grand Master of Calypso. Tonight is 11 singers in this ring, but we are not the only ones who could sing. Cause MCC leave out Black Stalin and Kurt Allen. Oh yes, so it's time you know the right things about Trinbago. Allah. Don't worry with all them set a Trini posing in Canada as refugee. That's a misconception they fooling you with, so as to get citizenship. And all them criminals up in Brooklyn is not Trinidadians doing the killing. We don't fight, we don't fuss, and when we cuss, we just say Paul. That's all. We go New York to shop, not to stay. We are not Haitians, we don't run away. This is not Bosnia, where men die like mice. This is paradise. And we have, like England, a female speaker here with some clout. Our female speaker does hold big men and kick them out. And when you see we police marching, don't feel they against Prime Minister Manning. For carnival, them and Manning, lighting and drinking. Abu Bakr stage a coup here, but Abu Bakr we no longer fear. But right now, he in the audience there, sipping a beer. So it's time you know the right things about Trinbago. Alive. Ay, 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 ay. Oh, that misconception. Calypsonian mighty arrow is he started soca. Oh no, that honor belongs to Rash Shorty, a resident of this country. And when you hear Pan on Sesame Street, it's not good and early who beaten sweet. That steel band is the creation of our land, not Japan. We are the only country in the world, I say. Government ministers just raise their pay, and as Calypsonians launch their attack, they just give it back. An American say Arsenio Hall is the best comedian. But I say he can't touch the shoes of our Tommy Joseph and sprang along. And if you see on our TV a man with his neck under a lady, he's not a starting sheep, he just dancing the donkey. On the road, Clinton goes jogging, Cabot knocking down, we smarter than him. So my prime minister uses a $2 million gym. So it's time you know the right things about Trinidad. I like. Listen to the gospel. Trinidad say, always late for work. Another misconception, a silly joke. For when he joins the New York mob, he's the first man upon the job. And Derek Walcott, Nobel Prize winner. It's true he was born in St. Lucia, but it's right here he learned to write his poetry and his short story. You see, and Rastas yet different from Jamaica. They don't commit murder or run mafia. You will find them in Kentucky every evening, murdering fried chicken. So all who watching me, I invite you to TNT. Cause my government ain't have money to advertise my country. So Michael Jackson, please come down here. The misconception of me fear. Come and play us in reason and get back your color. And there's a misconception, you know, that nobody can beat Sparrow. Well, tonight he will be destroyed by me and Coco. I say, so it's time to know. The times about Trinidad. Allah. Listen to the gospel. Trinidad say, always late for work. Another misconception, a silly joke. For when he joins the New York mob, he's the first man upon the job. And Derek Walcott, Nobel Prize winner. It's true he was born in St. Lucia, but it's right here he learned to write his poetry and his short story. You see, and Rastas yet different from Jamaica. They don't commit murder or run mafia. You will find them in Kentucky every evening, murdering fried chicken. So all who watching me, I invite you to TNT. Cause my government ain't have money to advertise my country. So Michael Jackson, please come down here. The misconception of me fear. Come and play us in reason and get back your color. And there's a misconception, you know, that nobody can beat Sparrow. Well, tonight he will be destroyed by me and Coco. I say, so it's time to know. The times about Trinidad. Allah.
I love being love being West Indian. Michael Jackson, if you have any misconception about being fair, come down and play Mass in the Caribbean and get back your color. Oh, misconceptions. There are lots of misconceptions about we. Lots of misconceptions. Misconceptions. Last night we made it very clear about Mr. Jack Dio. I don't know if there are misconceptions about his health. I saw him make an appearance today at some NDC meeting. He looks a little bit under the weather. And as I said here last night, some of you all beat me up because I said, if Mr. Jack Dio is sick, I wish him speedy recovery. Because we want to set an example of a humane country that we can tangle politically. But when it comes to illness, we take the humane road. And the PPP are in the habit of making fun of people's disabilities and people's illnesses and so on. They're an uncouth bunch. And I don't want you all to be like that. We want Mr. Jack Dio to exit the stage politically. He has done some political harm to this country. But we don't want him to suffer. So if he's sick, as many people seem to think, get well, Mr. Vice President. You're not my leader. No, oh no, you're not. You're not my leader. But you're my vice president because you were legally sworn in as the vice president. Your government is illegitimate, at least so I think, so the party that I come from thinks. And I think half the country, half the electorate think that you're illegitimate because you won a stolen election. But you're a legal government because you were sworn in the legal instruments. And so you're my vice president. You're my leader. But you're my vice president. And if you're not well, I want you to get well. So, Mr. Vice President, if you're ill, get well, my brother. I'm not a praying man, but I am praying for you. I come from an African culture that says, when it comes to illness and death, our political conflicts stop. And I want to teach the PPP that. I want to teach the PPP that. One of the reasons that our country is messed up is because this present PPP has taken the humanity out of our politics. A sick bunch of people. And I hope, if it's true that the vice president is sick, if it's true, I hope I'm setting an example of how we must behave politically. The same message from my brother Ralph Gonzalez. Brother Ralph has been an example to people like me who come from the progressive wing of Caribbean politics. He's always been, since I was a voice for the dignity of the Caribbean, the independence of the Caribbean, the progressive movement of the Caribbean. But recently, he put his mouth in Guyana's politics in an ugly way. As I said, I don't care if Ralph is on the same ideological wavelength as the PPP. That's his right. But he's a sensible enough man to know that our problem in Guyana is not just ideological. Our problem is deeply ethnic, deeply racial. And when you watch a black man and tell him, take your licks like a man, when he's being robbed, because Granger was being robbed of government. Vincent Alexander knows it is easy here. When you watch an African being robbed and tell him, take, he licks like a man, you're watching an enslaved black man being robbed and beaten during slavery, and you're telling me, take, he licks like a man. Ralph, you know better. And you're saying that as a Portuguese man who came to the Caribbean because an African, the Africans, cleared the way so that you could come here free. And you watch a black man being robbed until he take his lick like a boss. You're wrong, Ralph. Ralph, you are wrong. You are wrong. And if black people don't like you and cussing you, they have every right to. But I still think your legacy as a progressive Caribbean man, you taught me and so many of us about the Caribbean civilization. So when you get beat politically in St. Vincent, I still think that your exit of center stage in Caribbean politics is a blow. It's a blow to progressive politics. And so I won't tell you, take your licks like a man. I would mourn with you, Ralph. And I would say, you got 42% of the vote with one seat, 6% of the seats with 42% of the vote. They rob you, Ralph. The system rob you. And we are saying here in Guyana, the system rob the APNU, rob all of us in the opposition. The system. Just as the system rob you, Ralph. The election before, Ralph, you got 49% of the vote. But you get more seat than the opposition. The opposition was robbed. And this time, you were also robbed. I won't tell you, take your blows like a man, because I get my head on. As you got older, you start to lose it, Ralph. But I love you still. I love you. To the people of St. Vincent, with love. To Ralph Gonzalez, with love. We want to set an example here of a new kind of politics, something newer than what the PPP introduced. And I didn't discover that yesterday when Forbes Burnham died in 1985, in the height of the conflict between the WP and the PNC. Guyana said to us, I am going to file past Burnham's casket. I'm going to pay respect to him. Some in the WPA didn't think he should do it, but he said he's going to do it. And Rupert Narayan, myself, Wazir Mohammed, George Hines, my brother, who retired from politics now, we said we're going with you. So we didn't discover that today. It's always been our politics. Because we're a complex society. Complex society. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. We are doing politics, partisan politics, but we are also doing our humanity, which our country is fast losing. Fast losing. Welcome to Politics 101 on a Thursday night. Vincent Alexander is here. He hasn't been here for a while and we have a lot to talk about. We don't know whether Vincent is a commissioner, whether he's expelled, all kind of story we've been hearing. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the EU report because we can't stop talking about the EU observation report. We're going to talk to Vincent about it. And then the private sector commission start to run them out yesterday. They get a report and they're saying to the EU people, you're crazy. They're saying to Guyanese people, are you crazy? They're saying to the government of Guyana that it's crazy. Because the PPP said, what's wrong with incumbency? We have a right to use incumbency. And then the private sector commission saying the PPP didn't use incumbency. They didn't see anything. They're blind, but they're blinded. Not by reason. They're robbers who have robbed the Guyanese people of their patrimony. They got cash grant upon cash grant through all the goodies that the PPP gave them. And now they're skinning the you know what on the Guyanese people. Good evening, welcome to Politics 101. We're not backing down. We may be a little weaker in the National Assembly because we got less seats. I hear people saying, oh, the APNU was decimated. Decimated? You really think that we were defeated? Anyhow, let me don't go there. But Vincent.
Good evening, good evening.
All right, that's what I want to hear you loud and clear. How are you doing?
Not bad personally.
Politically?
Politically, we have bad weather.
Them old man in the village used to say, fair to cloudy. Oh Lord. Vincent, are you still a commissioner? A GECOM commissioner?
The answer is yes from more than one perspective. I'm still a commissioner insofar as I was appointed and there are three mechanisms for removal. Either I resign, either I die, or I'm removed for misconduct. Neither of the three have occurred, and therefore, under the laws of Guyana, unless the courts otherwise determine, I am a commissioner of the Guyana Elections Commission. But may I go further to say that there seems to be a lot of uncertainty, ambiguity, and equivocation by the chairperson of the commission about whether or not I am and some of us are commissioners. I say that because after the 17th of September, no meeting was called. And because no meeting was called, somewhere around after the 7th of September, somewhere around the 11th of September, we wrote to the chairperson, not calling for a meeting, but indicating that certain statutory things had not been done, and also indicating that if a meeting had been held, then she would have had the opportunity to do those things. And those things are, one, she never brought to the commission, as the law requires, the results of the regional elections for the commission to pave the way for a public declaration and the gazetting of those results. She never brought them. To date, she hasn't, though they were subsequently gazetted. She also did not make a public declaration of the results of the general elections. So we said, if you had called a meeting, these things you could have done, could have corrected the things that had not been done. She responded to us and in her response said the following, I quote, in relation to your request of summoning the meeting, we did not request that the meeting be summoned. Please be advised that I'm guided by Article 1613B of the Constitution. That article specifies that commissioners are appointed in a particular way, and that the leader of the opposition is the one who identifies, nominates 3 commissioners to be appointed by the president. I am one such person, having been nominated in 27 and having been appointed in the same year by the then sitting president. So she says that she is guided by Article 1613B of the Constitution. As to the composition of the commission, which will be decided on the convening of Parliament. Now, what in effect she is saying is that I haven't called a meeting because I have an issue with the composition of the commission, because the leader of the opposition should be making nominations and the president appointing, and that this matter will be decided on the convening of Parliament. In other words, she's saying when Parliament is convened, there will be a new leader of the opposition. And so this process of nomination will probably have to go on. And then she will know the composition of the commission. I have publicly referred to that as her seeking to dismiss commissioners. Because even if what she said is true, she has no authority to act on the matter. And if at all what she says is true, then she has no authority to act as the chairperson, because she is nominated in a manner not fundamentally dissimilar from how we were nominated and appointed by the president. And so if she wants to wait on the appointment of a new leader of the opposition to determine the composition, and more specifically, who are the persons appointed by the president after being nominated by the leader of the opposition, then similarly, she has to wait Parliament because she is similarly nominated by the leader of the opposition and appointed by president. But having said that, and that matter having been raised with her, she responded to the press by contending that she knew what she was doing, that she was associated with Shahabadin and knew what the Constitution intended, and therefore was in a sense saying, we don't have these opposition nominated commissioners at this time. There were a number of things wrong about that. I've already pointed out the first thing that's wrong about it. But the second thing that was wrong about it is that Shahabadin had nothing to do with GECOM as currently established. Her association with GECOM has to go back to the 1980s, when the 1980 Constitution was amended. But that time, there was nothing in that Constitution about the current formulation of GECOM. That only occurred in 1991. Shahabadin was nowhere in the frame at that time. Therefore, she was nowhere in the frame. And therefore, she's patently wrong to suggest that having been associated with Shahabadin, which had to be 1980, that she knows what was the intention of the Constitution. On the other hand, the things which we contended she should have done are unrelated to her contention, because those things should have been done at a time when no question could be raised by anyone about us being commissioners. That is, in the process of the declaration of the results, which we oversaw, we superintended along with her. But having raised that argument in the public domain after writing to us, she has recently written to us, inviting us. First of all, she wrote to us asking us if we were available to attend the meeting on the 11th of December. That I think is today. I responded indicating that I would be available, but I would require her to send me an official notice and an agenda. I am aware that one other commissioner indicated that he would be available. I'm not aware of what the others did, except for Commissioner Corbin, who was overseas and did not respond. However, yesterday, I received another correspondence from her saying that the meeting has been cancelled because of the unavailability of commissioners, since only one commissioner had responded. Now, here again, she's wrong because, as far as I know, two commissioners had responded. And my question would be, if you ask us to indicate our availability and subsequently send us a notice, it must be based on positive responses. So I don't understand now how she's saying that there weren't responses and therefore has cancelled the meeting until further notice. But I would take it. The fact that she called the meeting and addressed us and me as a commissioner, in some regards, is backpedaling on her previous disposition that she will await the convening of Parliament. Parliament was convened. This matter in no shape or fashion was addressed because the issue of the appointment of the leader of the opposition was not and has not been addressed, although Parliament has convened. So she was patently wrong about when this matter, if it were to be addressed, would have been addressed, because it's now probably into the fourth week. Parliament convened, and nothing in relation to the composition of GECOM has been dealt with. More specifically, the leader of the opposition has not been elected as the Constitution provides for, and what, for all intents and purposes, should have taken place 4 weeks ago.
We are into the 6th week since Parliament was convened. As a matter of fact, the second thing here, and Vincent, there are two people that were not officially lawyers who I think have a keen grasp of the law, and that's you and Guyana. I know somewhere along in your studies you did study law, but you're not a lawyer. But I have great respect for your understanding of the law. My understanding is that if the question arises as to what the framers of a constitution had in mind when they were putting together the constitution, that is the court, the judicial branch, that interprets what the constitution is actually saying. It is the judicial branch, the court, who must say this is what we think the framers had in mind. Am I wrong, Vincent?
You're quite correct. Even the framers themselves cannot now step in and say what they had in mind.
That's right.
It's the court that has to interpret based on the written provisions and the other elements of legal interpretation, context, and history. It's the court that has to step in to see what was the intention of the drafters of the Constitution. And the first step that the court will take is to give a literal interpretation, which means they will simply look at the text.
That's right.
And based on that text, seek to determine what was intended. And I would argue that in this instance, if one looks at the literal interpretation, there is no way in which one can conclude from that the life of commissioners come to an end at a particular time, other than if they resign, die, or are removed for misconduct. From a contextual perspective, one can also look at the Constitution. One can see that commissions other than GECOM, the term of a commissioner is specified. So we need now deal with context. Our Constitution has a tradition that where commissions are appointed, the terms are specified, 3 years. In the case of GECOM, there is no such specification. And from a historical perspective, since this provision has come into existence, it's been there in 91 as an individual act. It was repeated for the 1997 elections as an individual act. It became a normative act, I think, in 2005. But throughout this period, there's been no application of an interpretation which says that changes should lead the changes in commissioners, other than if they die, resign, or are removed for misconduct. So I'm saying that from an interpretation's perspective, whether it's based on the literal interpretation, contextual interpretation, historical interpretation, or a combination of these interpretations, I can see no basis for the contention that with a newly named opposition, new commissioners have to be nominated. Having said that, I still would agree that the court is the authority on this matter if it is being questioned.
If it is being questioned, Vincent Alexander here tonight. And this is a very important discussion. We're in school. I think Vincent puts it there. There are three ways. As someone who studied political science, we learned that there are three ways you interpret a constitution. The strict constructivism, what Vincent is calling the literal words, right? What is implied in those words and what is inherent in those words. And Vincent is saying that if you go to strict constructivism, nothing in the word in there says that GECOM chair can decide the composition or some member of the executive branch. It said nothing in the wording implies that. And nothing in the wording says that inherent in the wording is that. I think any amateur lawyer, right? And Vincent and I are not lawyers. We're not. You know, I study political science. Vincent, where you study by?
Let's call it legal studies.
Legal studies. Right? So Vincent know the thing better than me. You know, I always say when we were doing political science, 3/4 what we do were court cases. You know, 3/4 of politics is really court cases. When I was going to school, Vincent, to go to law school, you know, most people do political science as their first degree to go to law school. That doesn't mean political science is the only stuff. Nowadays, you can do English, you can do anything and go to law school. But there was a reason, because there's a relationship between politics and the law. And so therefore, I think Vincent is correct. The chairman is out of order to think that she can interpret the Constitution. That's one. Second, she is not respecting separation of powers, because she's sitting as part of the executive branch and trying to do the work of the judicial branch. Now, I know that she's a lawyer and she has legal instincts and instincts to the law, but she's, as the chair of the commission, she's not part of the judicial branch. So she's violating the separation of powers there. And thirdly, she's injecting herself into a partisan political discussion that is going on. Because whether the three opposition commissioners should resign or whether she should be kicked out has become part of a partisan discussion, because at least one party is saying they should. And I think I know APNU is saying they should not. I don't know what the PPP is saying. But she's inserting herself in a partisan political discussion, and she's heading a constitutional body in which she as head is assumed to be non-partisan. Vincent, am I going overboard with this?
Not at all. You're quite correct.
And so, therefore, this question is a very important question that we're dealing with. I am glad that she seems to have pulled back in inviting the commissioners to carry out their function. Vincent, before I move off of this, I want us to cover another base. During the 2020 election, when the PPP moved to the court to question what they saw happening at GECOM, the court said that there is some autonomy that GECOM has to correct things that relate to election that they see fit. And I think GECOM proceeded to do that in some regard. Is the composition of the commission part of that latitude that GECOM is presumed for?
What the law really provides for is if there are difficulties affecting the conduct of the elections, then GECOM can, by order, provide for the overcoming of those difficulties. And that is what ostensibly we did in 2020 by, I think, Order 66, which provided for a recount other than the recount normally provided for in the Representation of the People's Act. GECOM does have power. It has nothing to do with the composition of the body.
That's
to do with the conduct, overcoming difficulties in the conduct of the elections.
Now, the other thing I want to get your feel for, Vincent. There's an argument that is being made that said, look, morally, there's a change in the opposition, and that the opposition appointed commissioners should resign from a moral standpoint. And so what we have here now is political morality and what is legally required. And I have been turning that over in my mind. At what point political morality stops and legality begins? Can political morality at some point become unconstitutional? I've been grappling with that. And I know you, as a thoughtful person, you probably have been grappling with it more than I have. But I don't want to dismiss those who are making the point that, look, morally, you all should resign. And then others are saying, but when does morality trump what is constitutional and legal? Talk to us.
Well, first of all, it has been recognized from time immemorial that there is sometimes a coincidence between morality and law. In other words, sometimes what morality provides for is exactly what law provides for, and vice versa. So, first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that law and the legal system is absolute in the sense that it is something which all citizens are compelled to adhere to. So when a law is passed, it's not for one person against another. It's generally, it's applicable. And when we talk about the rule of law, that's what we talk about, the applicability of the law, everybody in the same manner. Morals are not like that. Morals are not absolute because morals can be associated with different sects, different classes, and different groups of people. So what may be moral for one might not be moral for the other. It's only when the morality corresponds with the law is that moral applicable of necessity to all. So there is this relationship, conjunction and disjuncture between morality and the law. But on this question of morality, I want to go back to the law and a possible intent of the law. First of all, the question of us having a moral obligation to resign is premised on the assumption that we are representatives of the opposition. And I have argued, not now, all the time, that we are not representatives of the opposition. There is a process for our appointment, which includes nominations by the leader of the opposition, and an appointment by the president in a constitutional office. And we are expected to be non-partisan. We're expected to be officers who protect and ensure that the provisions of the Constitution are realized in the conduct of our elections. So there's a disjuncture between us having been nominated with the opposition, because the opposition is obviously partisan, and it is not the intent that we should be partial or partisan, though in reality there may be, and probably there is, that partialness, and in terms of the conduct of the behavior of commissioners. But the intention certainly, in a constitutional office, is that you should not be partial. And therefore, that connection that people are seeking to establish has no basis in law and no basis in morality either, because morality here, in fact, is intended to protect us from being instruments of a particular interest. And it's probably for that reason that the law coincides with morality in this regard by not allowing us to be removed by a political party or the leader of the opposition. Because if that can happen, then we are likely to be looking to that person to determine our conduct rather than to the Constitution in determining our conduct. And so the question also arises about the similarity of our appointments with an appointment of the Supreme Court in the USA. The president in the USA, with no objection from the Congress, appoints judges, similar to us being appointed by the president with a nomination from the political party. But no president, having appointed a judge, can remove a judge. And the idea is that judges should be impartial and should not be representing the interests of the president, and therefore they are freed of the encumbrance that they will have if they can be dismissed by a president simply because he doesn't want them any longer.
Right.
And I think that there is some parallelism between that institutional arrangement and the institutional arrangement in terms of the appointment of GECOM commissioners. That is what, from a moral perspective, informs my disposition. Accepting that the law can trump morals, and therefore If the judiciary decides otherwise, that's the end of the matter.
That's the end of the matter. Vincent, I want to get your thoughts on a similar issue. If you want to, you can say no, you don't want to go there. There is this issue that has arisen on the, well, it's related, on the appointment of the election of the opposition leader. The Attorney General recently argued that the person who's likely to become the opposition leader is a fugitive. And so therefore, if he becomes the opposition leader in Parliament, it would compromise the government politically. Then there's the other argument that the presumptive opposition leader is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Again, I framed it as the moral argument. You presume innocent until found guilty. And what I hear from the Attorney General, a kind of a political realism that says if a fugitive is and that I'm using his words, yeah? A fugitive, it becomes a leader of it compromises the government politically. Let me get your thoughts on that.
Well, I take the position that one is innocent until found guilty.
Right.
That is one. Secondly, this man didn't appoint himself.
Right.
This man has been voted in by the electorate.
Yeah.
He didn't appoint himself. And therefore, that the system, we have what we call a democratic system based on representative democracy. The electorate has voted this man. Whether or not he seeks to take up the position of leader of the opposition may be considered to be a moral question. And the moral question is, as I said, not absolute and has to be determined by the affected person. That's the reality. What's his code of morality? What's his code of morality? Because morality is not absolute. There's nothing called morals that are absolute. We have some morals which have gained absolutism by virtue of the law. So thou shalt not kill. It's a moral question. Yeah. It's also absolute because it's the legal position as well. But this one we're dealing with here is quite separate from the law, and therefore it is up to the affected person to apply his or her moral code in responding to that matter. So on one hand, from a legal perspective, one is innocent until found guilty, yeah. And it's highly prejudicial. It's highly prejudicial to treat someone as if found guilty. And what the AG has said, in a sense, embraces that prejudice of saying the man is guilty. But the moral question is out there, and therefore the moral question out there, different people will take different positions because there's no absolutism in morals unless they have been enshrined in law.
Brother Vincent Alexander tonight. Well, this is nothing new to the viewers and you, the followers of this program. Tonight is a little bit different, certainly this part of the program, because we are engaged here in some more erudite kind of discussion. Some may say it's a little bit academic, but you know, the academic is political and the political is the academic. I think Guyana put it very nicely that people like Vincent and myself what we do is that we take the people's experiences, we refine them, and we give them back to you, the people, as political and cultural nourishment. And so we are faced with these arguments of morality and law. And in my estimation, if we simplify them, then we run the risk of reducing our society to a kind of simplistic understanding of itself. And so sometimes we have to engage in this kind of tedious discussion or apparent tedious discussion in order to tease out what we are facing, because we are facing some contradictions, and human experience, it's about contradictions, you know. Where does freedom end and order begins, or where does order end and freedom begins? Freedom could be seen as absolute, but then we can do anything, whether it causes disorder in the society or don't cause disorder in the society. And then there is that, if freedom means we do anything, then it becomes unfreedom, because we are going to do harm to each other and so forth. So our whole human experience is about these contradictions: freedom and order and freedom, morality and law. And so therefore, that's part of what we are trying to do here tonight, trying to bring a mature gaze on these issues that are facing us, rather than some of the simplistic things, even from somebody who ought to know better, as the Attorney General, as Vincent said. What he's doing is that he's making a prejudicial argument, and as the leading representative, legal representative of the government, legal advisor of the government, I would always expect a kind of more mature discussion coming from that direction. I remember when I first started paying attention to politics, the Attorney General, and Vincent could help me here, the Attorney General was not necessarily a member of cabinet. I don't know how it has evolved over time. Am I wrong, Vincent?
The Attorney General is not necessarily someone from the list of the party.
Yes.
The Attorney General is seen as a professional office. And in some regards, what we have done is to create another office called the Minister of Legal Affairs.
That's right.
We've combined the two. But the Attorney General is must be a lawyer, and it must be that he is employed to practice law on behalf of and be custodian of the law on behalf of the state. He's not supposed to be a politician.
Right. I remember Shahabuddin, and before Shahabuddin, help me.
We've had a number of lawyers who weren't originally identified as politicians, whether it was Messiah, whether it was Shahabuddin, even Bernard de Santos.
Right.
And, all of them, I mean, we saw them as being political when they became the Attorney General, but all of them were plucked out of the legal profession, specifically to be the Attorney General, without any previous association and being listed for elections.
Right. Sridhar Ramphal before Shahabuddin, Fred Wills, and so on. And if I may editorialize here, Vincent, and you are not responsible for what I'm going to say, is that those were men who respected the law and respected the profession. And they had, clearly, because they're serving in a government that is partisan, but those were men who had great respect for that profession and sought as much as possible to put some distance between their party politics and the profession itself. So I just want to editorialize that what has happened over time. And I'm glad you mentioned Santos, because I think he was perhaps the last, right, of that breed who said, I'm serving a partisan government, but I'm an officer of the law. And I want to protect the integrity of this profession. Will you associate yourself with that, Vincent? Vincent, you heard me? I'm
Yeah.
asking if you would associate or disassociate yourself with my editorial intervention there.
I'm listening.
Yeah. Okay. Vincent probably missed that. Vincent, let's shift gears a little. The European Union Observer Team. A
Oh,
few.
certainly
Yeah.
not.
You're breaking up a little, so
Certainly not. Certainly not. We are at one. I think we're at one.
we are one on that. All right.
I happen to
Let's.
have been associated with Bernard in some way or the other, and from my interaction with him, clearly he saw himself as a professional practicing in the position as Attorney General. He did not see himself as a partisan politician.
Right. Vincent, the European Union Observer Team had put out a preliminary report on the election, and then later on they put out a much more a broader and comprehensive report on the election. It caused quite a stir in the country because the government and some of its surrogates sought to condemn the European Union Observer Team for its report. I remember in 2020 when the reports by the observer teams were favorable to the government. I remember the Attorney General, among others, when asked, how do we know that the elections were free and fair? He said, all the observer teams, international observer team, said the elections were free and fair. This time around, at least one observer team qualified its conclusions about the general conduct of the election, and the government really went out on a limb. Give us your perspective on the European Union report and the government response to that report and what that means for our evaluation of elections going forward.
First of all, I would say the European Union report is largely deja vu. They have pronounced on the matters which they, on this occasion, pronounced on in similar manner on previous occasions. What they have emphasized on this occasion is the issue of incumbency and the issue of public communication. Those two things they've emphasized. They probably did not emphasize them that much previously, but they certainly emphasized them on this occasion. So it's largely a deja vu report. What is glaring about the report is that they have sought to stay away from pronouncing the elections as free and fair. They have, in a sense, said these were credible elections because what happened in elections day, you could see no flaw in terms of what happened on elections day, but the extent to which they looked at the elections from a holistic perspective, pre, peri, and post-E-Day. They did not step into the realm of saying these are free and fair elections, because something can be free and fair if the ground in which they stand does not provide for that freeness and that fairness, and certainly the ground does not provide for it. And the extent to which they reference the need for us to look at the voters list, which they have repeated, the extent to which they talk about incumbency, the way in which the state machinery is used by the ruling party, and the extent to which they talked about the way in which the state media and media at large was biased uh, in favor of the ruling party, is the extent to which they came to the conclusion we cannot pronounce this as free and fair, though we can pronounce the process in the election day as a process that was efficiently and professionally conducted.
And Vincent, I want to hold you a little bit long on this because I think it's a question of methodology. I remember after the 2025 election, the results were announced, and the opposition took the position that it was not a free and fair election, that you were at pains to say that this is not about SOPs and all these things that we saw in the recount the last time, because we don't have a recount this time and we don't see those things with our naked eye. And you were at pains to say, but it's the process, the process, the process. And I remember even somebody like myself was a little bit slow to grasp where you were taking us. And I think part of it has to do with the deliberateness of your delivery, right? You don't rush, you take your time. And sometimes, people who want the quick answer, the thing. But after listening to you, I got it. That what Vincent is saying here, the last time around, we could see that so many people were not in the country. The last, and voted. The last time around, we could see that 48 boxes, 47 boxes did not have statutory document. This time, we can't see that. But what we can see this time, if we use the methodology that talks about the process, what we can see is how the process has compromised the elections. Take it from there, Vincent.
I commented on 2020, I commented in 2025. I think in 2025, I've been able to move on in terms of the clarity of what I had said in 2020. And I have applied the concept of ISO certification to a determination of whether our elections are certifiable or not certifiable. Now, what's an ISO certification? ISO is International Standards Organization. It says what standards must be followed if something is to be considered to be credible and acceptable. It's often applied in the manufacturing sector. So in the manufacturing sector, if you were to produce a good, they say you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do that. Only if you do those things will they certify you have a good product. And so I use that in my explanation this time to deal with GECOM. Bearing in mind that former chairman of the commission, Steve Surajbali, had proposed that GECOM should in fact subject itself to ISO certification. Surajbali had proposed that. So I'm not singular in looking at the ISO. We didn't do it, but Surajbali had proposed it. And so what this certification does is to see the inputs into the electoral process. And by virtue of those inputs, to determine whether the outputs have met the standards required for good output. And so things like the electoral lists, things like people's right to vote are critical inputs in the electoral process. You can have a bad list and have a good election. You can't have an election that speaks about being free and fair, and then you exclude people from being able to vote, you disenfranchise people and have a good election. And so whilst the day activity may pass muster, the election itself may not be certifiable if the process, the elements of the process, do not meet the required standards, and some elements are fundamental elements. In an ISO certification, they can say, look, you have failed the test. They can say, look, you've passed the test, but there's some things you need to do to get a better score. And so I have looked at the things that are fundamental. Fundamental is the right to vote. If that fundamental thing is breached, then your product cannot be a good product. And we have a situation where the right to vote has not been realized for people who are incarcerated, though there is no law against it. It's not been realized for people who were working on the rigs out there, and those people are not in significant number. Fundamentally, you cannot have dead people listed in a manner that those names can be manipulated. And we consciously went to the election with dead people in the list. Now there are a plethora of dead people, many of whom are overseas. But we knew, and their names that we called that are on the list of dead people. And the process, the law provided for us to take action, to take those names off. And we sat upon it and did not take those names off. And therefore, in the process, we have things that negates standards required for the conduct of a free and fair election. And we need to address that if we're going to have a free and fair election. And I say that to say that even in the terms of the reports of the various observers, they have not necessarily taken that approach. And therefore, they have not all looked at some of the things which I have considered critical. But certainly, have looked at the issue of the voters' list, which is central to the conduct of a free and fair election.
And Vincent, are you surprised at the almost total conclusion that the private sector commission came to, looking at the same election as the elections, the EU commission, the EU observer group, but they've come up with a totally opposite conclusion? Are you surprised at that?
Not surprised at all. Not surprised at all. The private sector commission pre-election showed its hands. If you listen to the pronouncements, they did not seek to distance themselves from pronouncing on the incumbent. They made positive comments on the incumbent. So that is, they showed their hand in that regard. On the other hand, if one looks at the conduct of public affairs in this country, one looks at the budget, and one looks at the political trajectory, it is pro-private sector. It is pro-capitalist, and pro-private sector. Now, I'm not saying that your budget should be anti-private sector, but when your budget is skewed to developmental part, so-called developmental part, that puts the private sector at the center to the detriment of the people, then the private sector would have an interest in the elections and the outcome, because in a sense, the outcome of the elections determines the continuation of what they have been supporting. So that I'm not surprised that the private sector would, from a psychological perspective, have a difficulty in condemning an election in which, for which they're the beneficiaries. And bearing in mind that when you look at the manner in which the private news outlets benefit from enormous advertisements. And when you look at some of the private sector, how they benefited in terms of whether it was billboards and all of that. Oh, they had a field day. They had a field day. They made it possible. And you can't expect them to be a part of what made it possible and then turn around and say it wasn't a good election. No, it's so damn good for them, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Vincent
Apart from
Alexander.
the fact
Yes.
that you have individuals in the private sector who clearly are political activists for all intents and purposes, and they're at the top of the system.
Vincent Alexander here tonight, making the connection between what we call the private sector and the government. Really, these concepts like the so-called private sector, civil society. Is the private sector part of civil society anymore? Is it possible to have civil society in plural political systems like ours, plural societies? Like, have we really come to the end of civil society as a concept in helping us to understand societies like Guyana? The jury is out. Vincent, your closing thoughts.
Well, there are two things about it. One, we do not have a mature civil society, period. We do not have, our civil society has a lot of constraints, and it has to do with the political culture of our country, where if one really conducts oneself as a member of civil society or an organization in civil society, then the hammer will come down on you. You have to bear in mind that notwithstanding the fact that the state in Guyana does not own and control the economy as was the case in the past, the state is the largest actor in the economy. And anyone could be affected. And in this instance, many have been affected by showing their hands as being neutral, neutrality which can lead to them being critical of the government. So we don't have a mature civil society, period. But the private sector cannot be seen to be civil society because, economics and politics are two sides of a coin. They're inseparable. And therefore, a body that represents economic life, it has to be twin to some kind of politics. And if they're twin, how do you expect them to be twin and at the same time to turn around and bring down the other? They're Siamese twins.
Siamese twins. Vincent, as usual, thank you very much, my brother, for coming through and to help us to untangle some of these tangled things.
Let me say one other thing on this. Yes. Let me say one other thing. I said they're Siamese twins, and I was speaking to the current private sector and the government, because the private sector and the government are not always Siamese twins. It depends on the politics.
Right.
I would say under the APNU, the private sector and the government were not Siamese twins. And therefore you saw the position they took at that time.
Yeah, very important observations. Thank you, Vincent, for coming through again. We will see you probably in another week or two, waiting anxiously for that meeting that was postponed, that meeting that should have been held today, that was cancelled. We'll see what happens in the coming week. Thank you very much, Vincent.
allow me the opportunity um, to use your platform to do some advertisement.
Sure.
As you have correctly said there, I'm the chairman of IPADG. IPADG on Saturday will be having a market day and concert at the Theatre Guild. The market day seeks to give an opportunity to groups that are members of IPADG, that are production groups, to bring their products to market. This occasion is Theatre Guild for public exhibition and public sale. And so the public, you're invited to patronize groups, there are groups from all over the place, on Saturday from 10 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, a market day at Theatre Guild, sponsored by Apology. At 5:30 in the afternoon, we'll go into what we call a village concert, a Christmas village concert. So a concert that seeks to depict in some ways the way in which villages celebrated Christmas. And you're also invited to that. And there's a fee attached to that, a fee of $5,000. And tickets are available at the door, as well as I think tickets are available at Andrew's supermarket. And there may be some other place where tickets are available. Members of executive of Ipanaji also have tickets. And so I'm inviting all of you to lend your support to Ipanaji, a body which has been deprived of state funds for the conduct of affairs during the decade for the people of African descent, but a body which is trying to continue to work towards the goals of the decade. And these funds are specifically intended to help to fund some projects, which we have mentioned. Because of certain matters beyond our control, those funds are no longer available. And so we are organizing this concert and the market day to accumulate funds, not to pay staff, not for the secretariat, not for the executive members, but for the community groups that have embarked upon community projects. There are agricultural projects, food processing projects, etc. And we ask for your support as we seek to provide for African Guyanese community in the second decade for the people of African descent. Thank you for the opportunity. That promo.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And let me add my voice there. I encourage you, especially those of you who are in Guyana, but also those of you who are not in Guyana. You can sponsor a ticket or 2 tickets for persons to attend the concert. That is a way of contributing. You're not physically there, but you can contribute to the cause. So again, Ipadaji on Saturday, market day. The people who are in Guyana are the ones who are going to patronize that part because they're going to be physically there. And that starts at 10 in the morning, and then at 5:30 in the afternoon, evening, the Christmas concert. And here is where those of you in the diaspora can contribute. You can buy a ticket, buy 2 tickets, and ask Padaji to give the tickets to children, maybe. But that's a way to contribute. So being in the diaspora is not an excuse for not to contribute to this noble cause. Vincent, thank you very much. Is there a number? Is there a number that you can give offhand? But if not, you can provide me with that number so that, or if the Padaji people are listening, they can provide me with that number that I can use tomorrow night to help to push this activity. Do you have a number there?
I don't have
WhatsApp.
a number offhand, but I will get it to you to
Get
be
that number
used tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night. A WhatsApp number would be ideal. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vincent. And thank you all very much for staying with us tonight, Thursday night. A different kind of program, but all in keeping with what we do here on Politics 101. I remember Wordsworth McAndrew said, we got learning, we got education, and we get mobilization. I don't think he said mobilization, but I know he used to say, we got learning and we got education. We do it all here because we are not just trying to do the partisan politics. We're trying to repair Guyana. I'm not one of those who would say back in the colonial times, it's better. I ain't going there. But I remember at some point in our post-colonial experience, even when we contested politics fiercely, we didn't lose our humanity. Let me put it that way. And one of my concerns is the way in which we are losing the soul of our country. Losing the soul of our country. When you lose the soul of your country, everything gone down the drain. Everything gone for China. So we are fighting politics, but we are also fighting to keep our humanity. The way in which these people have encouraged our young people to throw away reasoning, to throw away family, to throw away community. Now, we just can't go on this way. We just can't go on this way. See you all tomorrow night. I'm going to try to assemble a big team tomorrow night. I'm going to try to assemble a big team tomorrow night so that we can do what the big team does. I'm going to see you all tomorrow night for another edition of Politics 101.